There's a kind of tiredness no nap can fix. It creeps in quietly after a phone call that seemed normal, after a visit that felt fine on the surface. But hours later, you feel hollow, empty, like a part of you got siphoned off while you were busy smiling and nodding. It wasn't the conversation. It was the weight behind it. The silent tug-of-war between your peace and their presence. The forced laugh, the carefully measured silence. The gut feeling that whispered, something's not right here. But you ignored it again. Let's be clear, some people don't yell, don't hit, don't betray in obvious ways. What they do is more subtle. They drain you. They chip away at your energy, your clarity, your self-respect. And the worst part, they often do it with a smile. This is not paranoia. This is your nervous system waving a red flag. And in today's video, we're going to name it, confront it, and reclaim the power you've been giving away without even realizing it. If you've ever walked away from someone and felt smaller, like you lost a piece of yourself, this video is your mirror. And if you're ready to stop second-guessing your instincts and start honoring your inner boundaries, then hit subscribe to True Stoic Way, the channel where ancient wisdom meets modern strength. No fluff, no sugarcoating, just the truth and what to do with it. Let's begin. Reason 1, they're not sorry. They're just afraid of getting caught. When we were children, we were often taught that saying I'm sorry was a sign of genuine remorse. That if someone apologized, even the worst mistakes could be forgiven. But as we grow up, we begin to understand that not every apology comes from true regret. Some apologies are spoken not because the person understands the hurt they caused, but simply because they got caught. And when the truth comes to light, the apology becomes a way to put out the fire, not to change the behavior. I once knew a woman named Dana, kind-hearted, family-oriented, always trying to keep the peace in every relationship. One day she discovered that her husband had been lying about their finances. He hadn't been abusive, hadn't cheated in the conventional sense, but he had been secretly borrowing money and investing recklessly for months without telling her. When Dana found out, he broke down in tears. He said he was sorry. He said he did it for the family. He promised to make things right. Dana forgave him, and a few months later, she discovered another hidden loan. She forgave him again, and then, a year later, it happened once more. The apology repeated, the tears returned, the promises were recycled. But one thing never showed up, change. Why? Because he wasn't sorry for hurting Dana. He was just afraid of getting caught. There's a huge difference between feeling guilty and feeling exposed. The first leads people to reflect on their behavior, ask themselves why they acted that way, and figure out how to fix it. The second only wants to erase the consequences as fast as possible, to return to safety without ever facing the damage done. Someone who truly regrets their actions doesn't just apologize, they change. They don't expect forgiveness as a right. They understand that trust has to be rebuilt, not overnight, but over time, with effort and consistency. Meanwhile, the person who only apologizes because they've been caught often acts like they're the victim, as if your pain is a burden on them. The conversation quickly shifts to their emotions, how bad they feel, how hard they're trying, how they don't know how to make it right. Suddenly, it's all about them. And you're the one comforting them. But the problem isn't forgiveness. Forgiveness is an internal journey, a way to free yourself from anger and resentment. What forgiveness doesn't mean is erasing all consequences. It doesn't require you to keep someone in your life. And it certainly doesn't demand that you trust someone again just because they said sorry. I once heard someone say, an apology is not a ticket back into someone's life. And they were right, because without consequences, there's no real reason for someone to change. People learn through experience. If lying, manipulating, or disrespecting you doesn't cost them anything, if they don't lose your trust, your relationship, or even just access to your space, then why would they stop? A person who betrayed you once and gets a second chance might not repeat the mistake. But someone who betrays you 3, 4, or 5 times, and all it takes to come back is a quick apology, then the problem is no longer just them. The problem is that you've traded your self-respect for the illusion of keeping the relationship intact. Let's be clear. Walking away, creating distance, or enforcing consequences doesn't mean you're being cruel. It means you've recognized what's unacceptable, and you're acting on that truth. That's exactly what Stoic philosophy teaches us. We can't control what others do, but we can always control how we respond. And sometimes the wisest response is to leave. You can forgive in your heart. You can let go of the anger and resentment. But if you continue to let someone back into your life without any real change, you're allowing your kindness to be exploited. And worse, you're robbing them of the only thing that might actually teach them real, tangible consequences. Let me leave you with this. If someone is truly remorseful, they won't demand immediate forgiveness. They'll accept the distance. They'll respect your process. They'll understand that rebuilding trust takes time. And if they can't do that, if they get angry, beg, or try to guilt you for setting boundaries, then that tells you everything you need to know. They're not sorry. They're scared. They just want you back in the same place, where they never had to be accountable in the first place. You don't owe anyone a third chance. You don't need another apology if the behavior hasn't changed. And you certainly don't have to prove you're a good person by allowing someone to step over your boundaries again and again. Sometimes the kindest and most powerful thing you can do for them and for yourself is to let their actions carry real consequences. Because once in a while, the only thing that teaches a person anything at all is your absence. But that's only the surface. What's even more troubling than false apologies is the way certain disrespectful behaviors can repeat themselves, not with shouting or threats, but in quiet, calculated patterns that strike exactly where you're most vulnerable. You think they're just being forgetful. You tell yourself, maybe they're stressed. You brush it off as coincidence. But if you pay closer attention, you'll see it's not the first time. It's not random. It's a familiar cycle that's been building over the years. Only now, your tolerance for it has grown a little more each time. If you've ever felt like someone is quietly steering your emotions, manipulating your guilt, or taking advantage of your silence, but you've never been able to put your finger on it, then what comes next will help you name it. Not to lash out, but to see clearly. To stop mistaking what's deliberate for something accidental. And if this journey is starting to touch a place inside you, a truth you've buried, a pattern you've endured, something you've silently excused for too long, then you're exactly where you need to be. True Stoic Way isn't here to tell you how to feel. It's here to help you see what's real. And if what you need right now is a compass for the parts of you that are tired of pretending, then you're in good company. Let's go deeper. Reason 2, disrespect is a choice, not a mistake. Some wounds don't come from shouting or direct insults. They don't explode loudly or leave obvious scars, yet they wear you down over time. This kind of damage shows up through small, recurring behaviors, each one seemingly harmless, but together they chip away at your dignity. At first you think it's just carelessness, a tactless remark, a broken promise, a cold glance. You let it go. Everyone slips up sometimes. But then it happens again and again, and eventually you begin to notice a pattern. The same excuses, the same tone, the same way they say, "I didn't mean to," or "you're overthinking it," or "let's not make this a big deal." It's no longer an accident. It's a cycle, thought out, repeated, and beneficial to them. You start to wonder, am I being taken for granted? And if so, when did that start? What's dangerous isn't that someone hurts you once, it's when they do it repeatedly and you slowly get used to it. They forget what matters to you. They're always late, then laugh it off. They cross a line, then say you're being too sensitive. At first, you feel a little off. Then you adjust, telling yourself not to be so reactive. Eventually, you don't respond at all. Not because you've forgiven them, but because you're too tired to bring it up again. Meanwhile, they're not tired because they've learned something important. They can get away with it. And when that lesson sticks, their behavior is no longer accidental. It becomes a communication strategy. There's a subtle form of manipulation that doesn't control you with anger, but with guilt. You feel uncomfortable, but tell yourself, maybe I'm just stressed. You're ignored or dismissed, but you think, they probably didn't realize. You want to speak up, but worry you'll ruin the mood. Over time, you stop trusting your own emotions. You begin living in a gray area where the line between disrespect and misunderstanding becomes harder and harder to draw. The danger is you stop believing in your intuition. These behaviors are designed to avoid responsibility. Toxic dynamics often follow a simple, familiar pattern, whether in families, romantic relationships, or work. A minor offense, a subtle insult, a clear sign of neglect. Minimization. I was just joking. You're too sensitive. Don't be dramatic. Appeasement. After you get upset, they act unusually kind or attentive to make you drop it. The cycle repeats. You're rewarded for staying quiet. You're made to feel selfish if you push back. And slowly you begin to reshape yourself to keep the peace instead of expecting others to respect it. The clues aren't in the words. They're in how you feel. You don't need concrete evidence to know something is wrong. You only need to pay attention to how your body reacts. Your chest tightens when their name appears on your screen. Your shoulders tense up when you're near them. You leave a normal interaction feeling drained and vaguely ashamed. That isn't random. That's your nervous system speaking. And it often tells the truth long before your mind is ready to. When you realize you're stuck in a damaging cycle, you don't need to shout or cut ties dramatically. Sometimes change begins with simple but firm sentences. I'm not okay with how that was said. If you're late again without notice, I'll need to reschedule. I need time to think about that. I'll let you know later. Soft tone, clear message. And if they respect you, they'll adjust. If they push back or get defensive, let that speak for itself, not with anger, but with recalibration. Many people believe that staying silent is a sign of maturity, that letting things go is noble. But sometimes silence is simply evidence that you've stopped standing up for yourself. Each time you ignore behavior that hurts you, you teach others that it's acceptable. And when disrespect becomes a habit, you're no longer someone they cherish. You become someone they can use. You can forgive a mistake, but you don't have to tolerate a repeated pattern that leaves you feeling smaller every time. You can empathize with someone's stress or flaws, but you are still responsible for protecting yourself from behavior that consistently chips away at your well-being. Listen to how you feel, not just when things go wrong, but in the small moments that follow. Trust the signals that whisper before they scream. Because when you start believing in your own boundaries, others will have no choice but to do the same. Reason 3, personal boundaries are the foundation of your self-worth. There's something most of us were never taught growing up. Boundaries aren't just about keeping others from hurting us. They're how we remind ourselves that we are worth protecting. Many people think that setting boundaries is selfish or cold, but the truth is the opposite. Without boundaries, there is no dignity. Without limits, self-respect slowly disappears. Because every time you stay silent when something hurts, every time you say it's okay while suppressing the sting, every time you allow someone to cross your line without consequence, you send yourself a quiet message. I don't matter that much. And over time, those small messages become a belief. You begin to accept treatment you once said you'd never tolerate. Not because you're weak, but because you've grown used to surviving instead of honoring yourself. Human beings learn through repetition. When you're constantly in situations where your voice is ignored or your feelings are sidelined, and nothing changes, you unconsciously start to adapt. You begin to adjust, not to grow, but to endure. You speak softer than necessary, rewrite your text 3 times to avoid offending, apologize for things that aren't your fault. And one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize the version of you who remains quiet to stay nice. Someone once said, I don't set boundaries to push people away. I set them so I don't lose myself when I'm close to them. That's the heart of it. You're not trying to hurt anyone. You're not looking to destroy relationships. But you keep stepping back once, then again, until you forget where your own line even was. The less you say no, the more people assume you'll always say yes. Boundaries don't disappear in one big crash. They erode silently when you decide again and again that keeping the peace is more important than being at peace. Listen to the things you tell yourself. Let it go. It's not worth the drama. I'm probably overreacting. I can handle it. No need to make a scene. They sound mature, but when repeated too often, they become the very voice that erases you. What you're really doing is choosing temporary ease over long-term clarity. You're making others comfortable while quietly betraying yourself. The truth is, you don't need to teach anyone how to treat you. You only need to stop rewarding what hurts. People who value you will adjust when they see you uncomfortable. People who don't will make you feel guilty for even flinching. That's your signal. You can't force change, but you can make it clear. If nothing changes, they don't get the same version of access to you. You don't need to raise your voice or make ultimatums. All you need is to be honest and clear. If this happens again, I won't continue. I need to be spoken to with respect, or I'll end the conversation. If the lateness continues, I won't make plans next time. These aren't acts of anger, they are acts of self-respect. And when you follow through, you're not punishing someone. You're proving to yourself that you can trust your own limits. You may have been taught that love is unconditional, that to love is to forgive and accept. But what no one told you is, love also needs limits, not to control, but to preserve, not to create distance, but to make space for truth. If a relationship can only survive when you shrink, silence yourself, or self-sacrifice, that's not connection. It's emotional dependence, a bond fueled by fear of loss rather than mutual care. There is deep freedom in saying, I won't keep showing up for this if it continues. Not out of bitterness, but out of the quiet, grounded belief that you deserve better than being continually hurt and calling it love. Boundaries are not barriers to push people out. They're reminders to yourself that you still matter in every room you enter. When you begin living that truth, you'll see you don't lose real relationships by setting boundaries. You lose the ones that only worked because you didn't have any. If this resonated, if anything in this spoke to a part of you you've been ignoring, if you're starting to realize how many times you've said it's fine just to avoid discomfort, then you're already waking up. At True Stoic Way, we don't teach you how to be nice. We help you remember what it means to be whole, to walk with clarity, to protect your peace without apology. Subscribe if you're ready to keep going, because the next step, it's harder, but even more necessary. Reason 4, enabling is not compassion. No one likes to believe they're enabling harm, especially when the intention is love, concern, or a deep desire to keep things from falling apart. You see someone repeating the same hurtful behavior, and instead of drawing a line, you step in to soften the blow. You tell yourself they're going through a lot. You hope maybe this time it will be different, but then it happens again. The same apology, the same promise, the same outcome. Nothing really changes. And so you forgive again. You give them another chance again. Not because you're naive, but because you truly believe you're doing the right thing. You think you're being kind. But here's the truth, when care has no boundaries, it becomes the very fuel that keeps the damage going. Every time someone hurts you and you protect them from feeling the weight of their actions, you're removing the one thing that could actually push them to grow: accountability. You think you're saving them from pain, but what you're really doing is saving them from reality. Because if a person can repeatedly disrespect you without ever losing anything, not your trust, not your space, not even your disappointment, why would they stop? The system is working, and the person keeping that system intact is you. Many of us grow up in environments where blurred boundaries are rewarded, where enduring is praised, where saying nothing is called keeping the peace, where forgiveness, no matter the cost, is seen as a virtue. So you learn to put others first, always. You learn to carry the emotional weight for everyone else. You believe that avoiding conflict is more important than honoring truth. And without noticing, you bring that same pattern into your adult relationships. You cover, you explain, you fix. You don't do it to enable, but enabling is exactly what it becomes. When someone hurts you and you don't require anything to change, you're not forgiving. You're signaling that the behavior is tolerable. They feel safe, you feel exhausted. They repeat the behavior. You justify and stay. And what you both end up calling a relationship is really just a loop of hurt and hope. One person doing the harm, the other one erasing the lesson. The hard truth is, you made it possible. We tend to admire people who can endure pain quietly, who forgive again and again, who love unconditionally. But real strength isn't about how much you can tolerate. It's about knowing when to stop tolerating what no longer respects you. Because love is not supposed to cost you your sanity. Love isn't about carrying someone through the consequences of their own behavior. Real love gives people room to take responsibility, not to punish them, but to allow them to grow. It might sound counterintuitive, but the most loving thing you can sometimes say is, I won't stay in this dynamic if nothing changes. You're no longer shielding them from impact. You're giving them the truth, and if they're ready, they'll be grateful for it, even if it stings. But if they can't accept that, if they guilt you, beg, get angry, that's not remorse. That's someone losing control over a dynamic they thought they owned. You can forgive, but if nothing changes afterward, your forgiveness becomes part of the problem. Forgiveness alone doesn't fix a pattern. It must be paired with responsibility, or it becomes a cycle. You need to learn how to love with limits, not because you're cruel, but because you've realized without boundaries, compassion becomes a disguise for dysfunction. If you've been wondering why someone never seems to change, no matter how many chances you've given them, maybe the better question is, have you ever truly required them to change? Or have you simply kept cleaning up after them, hoping that this time they'll finally get it? Enabling is not kindness. It's a slow surrender of your energy, your voice, and your peace, and it doesn't save the other person. It stunts them, because a person who never sees consequences never learns how to be better. If this made you pause, if you're beginning to realize that your kindness might be keeping you stuck, if you've always been the one holding everything together, maybe it's time to stop holding and start choosing differently. At True Stoic Way, we don't just talk about recognizing the truth, we help you live it. Follow the channel if you're ready to stop over-functioning for others and start showing up for yourself. Because you don't owe anyone protection from consequences. What you owe is honesty with them and with yourself. Reason 5, reclaiming your power and finding inner peace. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from the body, but from the soul. You don't yell, you don't cry, you don't break down, but you live in a constant state of tension. You're always managing other people's emotions, always trying to prevent conflict, always silencing parts of yourself to keep things from getting worse. That's what happens when you stay too long in relationships without clear boundaries. You're no longer allowed to just be yourself, only the version of you that's easiest for others to accept. You don't get to feel, only to maintain harmony on the surface. And little by little, you begin to doubt yourself. Am I just being too sensitive? Am I expecting too much? Is peace something selfish to want? But the truth is, peace doesn't come from being able to endure more. Peace comes from no longer needing to. When you don't set clear limits, people don't just hurt you. They start controlling your emotional landscape. Their moods become your weather. Their reactions decide whether you feel calm or anxious. You stop being the author of your own life and become a character in someone else's. And worst of all, you get used to it. You no longer realize you're living as if you have to earn the right to feel calm. Some people think consequences mean punishment, that if you create distance, cut contact, or say no, you're being cruel. But in truth, consequences aren't about hurting someone. They're about restoring balance. If someone keeps lying to you and you trust them the same way afterward, the lie becomes normalized. If someone crosses your boundaries and you stay silent, the violation becomes routine. Consequences are how you stop the cycle. You don't create them to cause pain. You create them to protect yourself from ongoing harm. One of the hardest things to accept is this: some people will never change, not because they're incapable, but because they don't want to. And if you're holding your peace hostage to the hope that someday they'll get it, you're tying your well-being to something you cannot control. That's when you have to return to the most important question. If this person never changes, what do I need to do to feel at peace? That question isn't bitter, it's the beginning of taking your peace back into your own hands. You can spend your entire life trying to make someone see your pain, You can explain, argue, prove, beg, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop. Because peace doesn't come when they finally say you were right. Peace comes when you no longer need them to. You don't need their agreement. You only need to decide they no longer get to disrupt your peace. That moment, when you stop negotiating for respect, is when everything changes. Not through threats, but through quiet consistency. No one can take away your inner peace unless you hand them the keys. But to protect it, you must learn to say no. You must be willing to walk away when needed, even if your heart still cares. You must be willing to choose short-term discomfort over long-term harm. The truth is, the freedom you crave has always been yours. You just stopped claiming it, because for too long you made it conditional on someone else's behavior. Strength isn't always loud. It doesn't always mean slamming doors or dramatic exits. Sometimes it looks like this: looking someone in the eye and no longer needing them to agree. Hearing an apology and knowing you're under no obligation to forgive. Putting down your phone instead of replying to a message that weighs down your spirit. That's the quiet power of someone who finally knows their limits and honors them without apology. You don't have to wait for someone to change to be at peace. You only have to stop giving them the power to disturb it. The question you carry with you after all of this isn't, how can I make them see? It's, what do I need to do to stay kind to myself, even if they never understand? That answer is your compass. Let it guide you home. If this resonates, if you're tired of trying to be the one who always understands, if your peace has been held hostage for far too long by someone else's behavior, then now is the time to take it back. True Stoic way doesn't ask you to be perfect. It simply reminds you that everything you need is already within you, and that you don't have to ask permission to live from that truth. Subscribe if you're ready to step out of survival mode and into a life where your peace is no longer negotiable.